if you disagree with something, it helps to understand it so that you can respond more effectively. So let me, a former leftist, help you understand the leftist view on gender ideology. Hey guys, welcome back to KingdomCraft, where I build this big church in Minecraft while I talk about Christianity. Today I'm mostly just going to go mining. And yeah, so today I'm going to be talking about how to respond to different leftist debate tactics. Or they don't call it a debate, they just call it a conversation, but their goal is really to try and convert you to leftism. So, as you guys know, I wasn't raised a conservative Christian. I grew up in a very leftist cultural environment. But I'm actually glad about that in hindsight because it means I understand leftism, I understand how to respond to it. So people would always ask me things like, what are your thoughts on sexuality and gender? Or like, let's have a conversation about sexuality and gender. So I don't really have many thoughts about that. I don't spend time thinking about sexuality and gender because it's pretty straightforward. There's men and women, and the reason for that is so a man can marry a woman and they can have babies. Pretty simple, not much to talk about. But it's the same reason why I don't spend much time thinking about, say, like, oxygen, even though it's everywhere. I don't have many thoughts about it because it's real simple and straightforward. Oxygen is an element that you need to breathe, and luckily it's 21% of the atmosphere. So I don't normally think about it, but if someone comes along and says, hey, let's have a conversation about oxygen, let's deconstruct oxygen. I'm like, yeah, let's not. But they always want to deconstruct everything. When they say, like, let's have a conversation about this, the purpose isn't to gain insight and build up knowledge. It's to confuse and tear down. It's part of their whole philosophical worldview, which rejects objectivity altogether. So, when people ask you to use their pronouns, they present it as asking a simple favor out of kindness and courtesy so that you can make them feel better. They make it seem like it's not a big thing to ask, but really, they're asking much more of you. They're asking you to abandon your current way of viewing reality altogether, not just regarding gender, but regarding everything, and adopt a whole new philosophy, a whole new religion, in fact. Classical philosophy, which is just the default for most people, is that reality is just out there. Reality is something, it's objective, and that means certain things are true whether we like it or not. We may individually have different ways in which we experience reality, but our subjective experience of reality is less important than reality itself. The philosophy of the left, however, is not classical, it's postmodern, which says the exact opposite, that our personal experience of reality is everything. It's our personal experience is really what matters, and maybe objective reality doesn't even exist at all, or if it does, it's less important than the subjective personal experience. That's why you always hear about, like, your truth and someone's lived experience. That's why it's such a horrible sin for them to disrespect someone's lived experience, because that's their entire reality. It's not just their feelings. And yeah, they say it's everything. So in a classical understanding, male and female are objective and scientifically measurable, and it doesn't matter how you feel. You're either male or female based on your chromosomes, and there's no reason to question it. In postmodern leftism, however, they see that attitude as oppressive. Since, according to them, everyone creates their own, like, universe to live in, making objective claims is basically forcing your world on someone else. That's why they say it's gaslighting if you ever dare question someone's lived experience. So the left encourages everyone to create their own reality, since every aspect of traditional thought, they say, is polluted with all kinds of oppression. So when someone changes their pronouns and says they're some non-binary gender, of course the left will cheer them on, and if you question it or won't go along with it, you're basically committing murder, because you're denying them something that defines their whole reality. You're denying them something critical and fundamental to who they are. So that's why they think of it as like an unforgivable sin to misgender someone or to dead name someone. Now, all of this is deeply tied to religion, even though they will try to make it like it's not. In Christianity, reality is objective, since God creates and sustains reality itself. We each have our own experiences, but God's objective reality is more important. God is always greater than us. In fact, even if popular atheism says otherwise, it was Christianity that started modern science. There was always some sort of science, but Christianity started science as we know it, since the founders of the scientific revolution, like Isaac Newton and Galileo, believed that God created an objective and logical, comprehensible reality for us to discover. I know Isaac Newton wasn't like a theologically orthodox Christian, but he believed in the Christian concept of a God and believed the Bible was God's word, so yeah. Definitely not the way modern pop atheists make it seem like it was. They make it seem like the scientific revolution was a rebellion against religion, but that's not true at all. That's complete pseudo-history. So leftism is a religion, but not based on God in the classic monotheistic sense. In leftism, since you create your own private universe, and that's all that really matters, you are God to yourself. That's why you'll see a lot of progressives, feminists, and LGBT activists constantly talking about self-love. Self-love is religious devotion in leftism, since the self is God. Since it's so dominant in our culture, many Christians even promote this self-love rhetoric, not knowing the roots behind it, but I think self-love is completely anti-Christian, and can quickly and easily devolve into self-worship. You know, it's John Calvin who said, the heart is a perpetual factory of idols. So if you're promoting this rhetoric of self-love and self-care too much, it can very easily turn into making yourself into your own God, which is what is fundamental to the leftist religion. The leftist religion, oh yes, diamonds, worships the God of self. That's their God. And I have a whole other video about self-love and why I don't think Christians should be a part of it. That's not what this video is about, really. So that's why you can't be Christian and religiously leftist. What I mean by that is you could agree with leftists on some like political or economic issues, but even though they try to deny it, leftism is a religion. It's a fundamentally different way than everything else of seeing the world. It comes from the ideas of Karl Marx, who rejected all traditional religion, especially Christianity, because that was the religion of Europe at the time. But he proposed a whole new way of seeing the world. He invented modern progressivism, which states that we always have to improve our own realities. That's why progressivism always changes. That's why progressives always need to cancel past like historical figures, and why stuff that was fine to say 10 years ago is unacceptable now, and what's fine to say now will be unacceptable 10 years in the future. So leftism is really like a virus. Viruses don't create anything, and they can't reproduce on their own. They need to hijack healthy cells and reprogram those cells to create more viruses. That's what the left does. Their philosophy is so flawed that it can't drive them to create. It can't drive them to create anything that's actually good. All that they can do is hijack existing things. All they can do is like hijack institutions and other things that Christians created. Remember, Christians started all the top universities like Oxford, Harvard, Yale, Princeton. It was conservative, well, they weren't conservative for their time. It was Bible-believing Christians who started them, but they've been hijacked by leftists, and now they're leftist factories. They're petri dishes of progressive ideology. Leftists also hijacked the mainline Protestant churches, and instead of actually trying to renew the churches, the evangelicals just split off and formed their own churches, and that's why we have modern evangelical churches. And I think that was a mistake, but I have a bunch of other videos about that. Okay, so what can we do about this whole leftism thing? Well, I'll go back to the whole virus analogy. The way that our cells fight viruses is by learning to recognize the virus, learning how the virus works, and understanding the virus. That's why you can develop an immunity to viruses once your cells learn about the virus. So I say learn about leftism. Study the history of it. Most people on the left and not on the left only know the surface level leftism. They don't know the philosophy behind it. So look up people like Karl Marx, Judith Butler, John Money, the Frankfurt School, and like cultural Marxism, stuff like that. I recommend a lot of stuff by Dr. Jordan B. Cooper, who's a brilliant Lutheran theologian, and theology is his main thing, but he also has a bunch of very good lectures on cultural Marxism. And Wikipedia, by the way, the Wikipedia page on cultural Marxism says it's an anti-Semitic conspiracy theory, but okay, I'm ethnically Jewish, I have Jewish heritage. There's nothing anti-Semitic about it. The reason they say that is because a lot of the figures behind cultural Marxism are Jewish, but that doesn't make criticizing cultural Marxism anti-Semitic. And Wikipedia used to have like a legit page on cultural Marxism just explaining what it is and explaining it like it's a real thing. But then once activists pressured them, they changed it and said cultural Marxism is not a real thing, it's just an anti-Semitic conspiracy theory to say that it exists. But yeah, that's not true. They always try to like tell us that our ideas are conspiracy theories, and so, there are some things on the right that are conspiracy theories, and I encourage you not to believe it, like all that QAnon BS. But yeah, they will lump real things in with conspiracy theories. Anyway, that's about it for today. Just some advice on how to understand leftism from me, your resident former leftist. But yeah, so God bless, and don't be afraid, don't back down.